Your deposition, you testified that you were going to be paid $100 an hour for your time in this case.
I did not testify to that.
You did not?
That's an error in the transcript.
Oh.
Hi there, Liam O'Gogan. It's the 5th of May 2022. So you'll have just heard that short clip from the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial that's going on in America at the moment. And what you will have heard the person say, and I'll just play it back again in a moment, is that what was recorded and written down in the transcript, according to this person, is not a true record of what she said. So just listen again. So listen again.
Testified that you were going to be paid $100 an hour for your time in this case.
I did not testify to that.
You did not?
That's an error in the transcript.
Oh.
Okay, so what interests me about this, obviously this saga is going on live on TV in America and all over the world at the moment. So this is a court case being tried in a public space, as under Article 34 of Irish Constitution, courts should be administered in public. So it's a deeply held philosophy by me that all of our court cases should be held in public. And in the modern era, with access to streaming, technology, etc., I believe that all of our court cases should be published online all of the time to enable us to oversee the governance of justice in our courts. So the specifics of this video are really to look at the concept of transcripts. So a transcript is where the words that are uttered in a process during a submission or a court hearing or a tribunal or a deposition, as they carry out in America. So the words are written down or transcribed. So a transcript is a verbatim record of what is said. So in other words, word for word, it is exactly what the individual said. And so for me, there are sort of 4 layers to one's ability to interpret, appreciate, and take in what goes on for example, in a court case. And in the true representation of justice being administered in justice, I or you or any other member of the public should be able to attend at a court. So if you attend at a court, you should be able to, 1, audibly hear what is said so that you can bear witness to it. So that's I'll ask you to think of it. How many courts have you ever been in where you can actually hear what's going on or what is said? The second thing is you can bear witness to the environment in which it is being said. Because my contention is that what is said and how people react and speak is related to the environment they're in. You can interpret the body language of the characters who are speaking, and you can look at the timings and interjections of when people either increase their cadence or the intensity or pressure that's going on. Maybe they start cross-talking on each other, etc. And you have a visual impact of the various characters that are there. When you reduce this to a transcript, it's like filtering all of this experience to the very bare minimum. So you just read words and you don't have the characterization or the animation, that extra layer of information, intelligence, and insight and understanding that you can apply. And given that it's well recognized in communication that the vast proportion of communication is affected through body language, for me, the question is, what is the authenticity and the percentage of authenticity of the words that we read in a transcript? So that's sort of a big landscape question. Now, if we drill down into the specifics of this, and if we look at just the only area in which we in Ireland ever get access to what's going on in a legal hearing is possibly through a transcript. Well, then just look at the transcript itself and just reflect on the fact that would you expect that a transcript should be an accurate verbatim record of what is said? So just listen again to this excerpt from the Johnny Depp trial. And I'll just go back to the very start again, just a second, just Right.
Your deposition, you testified that you
So just to explain, in a deposition is part of the legal process which is carried on in parallel with court hearings and before the court hearings. We'll have seen them in lots of the movies and legal serials that we'll have seen on TV, where the person goes in and they're questioned by the legal representatives of either side. This is recorded on video, and out of these, a transcript is produced. So listen to this particular transcription.
were going to be paid $100 an hour for your time in this case.
I did not testify to that.
You did not?
That's an error in the transcript.
Okay, so what we have is this person saying, this is the witness on the stand saying, I previously participated in a deposition, which, again, I make the presumption is a sworn deposition. And they're claiming that the words that they use are not the words that were typed in the transcript. So before we go any further, I'd pose the question, would you expect in 2022 that the quality and of the technology that would be used in America in a case such as this, wherein the stakes at play are in the order of $50 to $100 million. That's what's being sought by both or either party. So a significant series of money. Would you expect the technology in play, the quality, accuracy of such technology would be equal to or better than that which you would expect in maybe a district court in Ireland held in the local pub, or maybe in a local community hall or wherever, or even in a properly structured building or high courts or whatever? I would pose that, I would expect the technology available in this trial and in this process to be of a higher quality. And yet here we have a person stating that the transcript is incorrect. So I want to play the whole clip and just have some thoughts and reflections on that. Before I do, let me, just to say that I'm carrying this out on an iPad, which is interesting. So I'm recording myself on through the camera in front, then switching over to my Photos app. So just to put the context in here, this is a sort of a quotation from Confucius, which has been in the center of my philosophy, I suppose, for the last 30 years, since I first came across it in an article in, I think it was a Sunday newspaper in Ireland. Anyway, it's by Confucius. And if I just read it carefully there, if language is not correct, then what is said is not what is meant. If what is said is not what is meant, then what must be done remains undone. If this remains undone, morals and art will deteriorate. If justice goes astray, the people will stand about in helpless confusion. Hence, there must be no arbitrariness in what is said. This matters above everything. By Confucius, the Chinese philosopher and reformer, who lived 551 BC to 479 BC. So that's 2,500 years ago, in which he set this down of the standard of that it matters. Veracity, authenticity, accuracy in the meaning and use of language matters. Okay, so let me go back then to the transcript. And what I'll do is, again, I'll just run it from the start. And this time I want you to listen, not just to the first, so we did the first section, obviously, and just run it back to the start. So what this person is going to do is she's going to state that there was an error in the transcript. She is then going on to further state that there were a number of errors in the transcript. And in the cross-examination, she will then bring out the fact that in spite of knowing there were numbers of errors in the transcript, she took no action to create such errors. So let's just listen to that. Right, let's play it
Your
through.
deposition, you testified that you were going to be paid $100 an hour for your time in this case.
I did not testify to that.
You did not?
That's an error in the transcript.
Oh, that's not right.
That's correct.
So, and you corrected the transcript?
We did not do an errata in the transcript at this point.
So you knew there was an error in the transcript, but you didn't fix it?
There were several errors in the transcript.
But you didn't fix any of them?
There was no time to fix them. That's correct.
All right. So,
Okay. So this person has stated that not only was there one error, and we'll look at the specifics of that error and its meaning in this case in a moment, but she then goes on to say there were a number of errors in the transcript. Now, in relation to what I said there about Confucius, and on the presumption that there is a reasonable presumption, I say, there is a video recording, an audio video recording of said deposition. And on the presumption of the quality standard of the technology that would have been used to record this, that as long as the individual was remotely articulate, that a reasonably competent person would have transcribed this with 100% accuracy. We therefore have either this person is stating a falsehood or she is not. But note that neither party seemed to be overly surprised. And, the cross-examiner is not shocked at the idea that there's an error, nor is he saying to her, you're wrong. He is challenging the fact that she didn't correct it. And that in itself raises other issues. Let's just listen. We'll bear at the last couple of seconds to see the relevance of this error.
you're not being paid $100 an hour. How much are you getting?
I'm being paid $500 an hour.
$500 an hour. And that's what, and that's the bill you sent for your deposition, right?
Okay, so the error was that the transcript states she was earning $100 an hour, where she claims she was earning $500 an hour. And she didn't correct that error. A cynic might ask, would she have been more interested in correcting if it said she was earning $500 an hour when she was only earning $100 an hour? Anyway, that's not really my focus. Here's my focus, folks. So I'm left here in this country that I've operated in, and in dealings which I've had with authority or with the legal system or otherwise, I'm presented with the idea that a transcript is a supremely accurate document. So when we look at the transcript of the Charlton Tribunal, for example, which I took the trouble of reading on a daily basis, I am given to believe that this is a 100% accurate recording of what is said. And immediately there, in a 2022 court case, which I think is a wonderful exposition of justice being carried out, administered in public, we already have a gap in the authenticity of such belief that a transcript is accurate. And I mapped that against, yes, again, I just put up the reflection of Confucius' point, accuracy in the use of language. If language is not correct, then what is said is not what is meant. If what is said is not what is meant, then what must be done remains undone. If this remains undone, morals and art will deteriorate. If justice goes astray, the people will stand about in helpless confusion. Hence, there must be no arbitrariness in what is said. This matters above everything. So this is about arbitrariness in terms of producing a record. It's unacceptable. It's not negotiable. It's unacceptable. So let's say I find myself dealing with authority in Ireland or going to a court, and a transcript emerges from said hearing. Whether it's a tribunal or a deposition or a court case or any other hearing that's taking place, but it's provided in this pseudo-professional space where Joe Public like me is expected to defer to the accuracy of such a position. And yet I've just shown examples of where I think it's reasonable to assume that there is a problem with this transcript, with the accuracy of the transcript. So let me move on to this concept in law or in Irish legal system, which is called DAR, the Digital Audio Recording System. So I am led to believe that in the courts in Ireland, they have installed digital audio recording equipment, DAR equipment. Now, I trace that back somewhat to around 99, 2000, that period in which the then Chief Justice Susan Denham presided over a reflection or review into the administration of justice in Ireland, the court systems. And out of this emerged I think at the time was something like 14 million euro or pounds or whatever it was to provide this equipment in the courts. And in the early days, there was certainly in my experience at the courts, you couldn't be sure at all that there'd be an audio recording system in place. It was only in some of the courts, sometimes the district court, well, sometimes the circuit court. Certainly didn't seem to me in the early to mid 2000s to be in the district courts, and certainly where courts are held in pubs or community halls around the country, etc. The chances of this equipment being in there are almost zero and none. And in fact, reflecting on for myself in a judicial review appeal that I took to the Supreme Court back, I think around in 2002 in relation to the standing in a general election and appealing a decision to not allow me nominate my profession as being a father. I appealed this to the Supreme Court, and a decision was handed down verbally, and I went into because I wanted to appeal that decision. I wanted to appeal it to Europe. I went into the court office, and the registrar of the Supreme Court told me, did you know that there are tape recordings, because there was tape recordings at that time, in two courts in Ireland, the Supreme Court and the Court of Criminal Appeal, an issue which a technology I didn't know was in existence. So I was delighted to hear that. So I asked him, can you arrange for me to have a copy of the recording? And he said to me, well, actually, and this is when I gave up on my idea of believing in the truth and authenticity of the system. He said, actually, I'm not sure if the tape recorders were turned on. And he never got back to me after that. And to be honest with you, I gave up because I just had the sense I had seen the cat get stuck in the matrix. You know, I'd seen the simulacrum of the matrix. But we've moved on. We now have supposedly DAR throughout the courts. The problem is, if you or I, a person, wants a copy of this recording, it appears to be almost impossible to get it. And in dialogue with other people throughout the country, they have told me, again, this is hearsay for me, but it's anecdotal. The judges have stated that DAR is there for the use of the judge, and not for the judge to go back and check on what they said, but not for access to the public. And in the trials that were the case taken by John Waters and Jim O'Doherty during the COVID period, a period during which, under emergency legislation, the state decided that people couldn't be present in court in the normal way. So therefore, Article 34.1, the administration of justice in the public, was being denied or restricted. And in that trial, again, I read the transcript of those hearings. Again, what I'm saying, is that actually what was said? How do I know what was said? Because we've already seen in the evidence I've shown you now, there is no proof that what is written in the transcript is what is said. But in those transcripts, the sitting judge stated that he would release the DAR recordings to Jim O'Doherty and John Waters. And in those transcripts, I read Jim O'Doherty telling the judge that her purpose is to distribute and publicize these DAR hearings so the rest of us could see or hear what was going on. From my perspective, the relevance of this is that I was living up in West Donegal. I, as a citizen, wished to be present at said hearing in order to witness the administration of justice in public. That's not to say that I supported either side in the decision. That wasn't the issue, but I was interested in the argument. And I, under travel restrictions, couldn't travel, so I couldn't go to the courts. And I applied to the court services for a copy of that DAR so that I, as a citizen, could review the material. And I was told that I had to go through this process and that process, and I was just completely inhibited. So it's interesting. Emergency legislation was telling us we had to do things in a certain way because under emergencies, but yet the emergency didn't extend to providing me my civil right to have access to the information. So you start off this video talking about, remember, we have a witness stating that what is written in the transcript of her deposition, that there are a number of areas which are incorrect. She has not corrected the errors. However, it throws up the question of whose role is it to cross-check whether there are errors or not? Is it her responsibility? And whose errors would she be correcting? So there's every party to said hearing have a personal obligation to check on the accuracy of a document. And then who is accountable if the document is incorrect? Is there a punishment? Is there a quality circle, a quality control loop whereby things are checked and cross-checked? Because to a large degree, like certainly a case that's run at $50 million or whatever, if this isn't mission critical, I don't know what is. But now we have a situation where at least, let's say it was someone like me who was involved in a court case, and the transcript is provided out of that, which might, a word here or a word there can make a huge difference in the outcome for an individual. And now I have proof. I've just shown you proof there of a contemporaneous present event of an example of errors in a transcript. Yet I wouldn't be able to get access in any way with these. So, for example, when I have asked the court services for this, apart from getting the runaround, it was, material was put in my way about maybe having to pay €1,000 an hour for recordings or something. Now, just remember, a DAR recording is something, anybody who knows anything about the bass recordings, if you press a button, it works, it produces, let's say, an MP3 file, even if it's 48 kilohertz or whatever. Doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, it costs nothing to do this, and you just press a button to produce it. So there's nothing short of negative inhibition in terms of preventing people having access to this. Now, I set out to start my political, my societal philosophy is that all cases should be administered in public. That's in our Constitution, Article 34.1, except in exceptional circumstances. While I might disagree with a lot of those too, the norm is that courts are held in public. And therefore, any technology which increases the potential of having increased access by the public to the administration of justice should be proactively supported. Now, the recently retired Supreme or Chief Justice, he gave a talk at the opening of the court sessions, I think probably back in 2018, when he mused over these topics. Frank, I remember his name, but anyway, he had this superior view of the world that this was not a good thing or it should be done very carefully. In other words, and my view of it is yes, he as a judge and his collegiate brethren, sisters, brothers, whatever, all have a personal interest in ensuring that there's restricted access to the governance and oversight of administration of justice. In other words, if we, the public, can see what's happening in there, then it will be that judges will be held to a higher standard. In other words, we will be able to see what's going on. It's a quality control system. And I believe everything, and I don't believe the decision making about whether we should be able to see that in video or not should be left to judges at all, because they have a vested interest. And I'm not impugning any of their characters or suggesting that any of them are corrupt. That's a different conversation. That's not the point I'm making. I'm saying I believe I should have access to any court hearing held anywhere in Ireland, and as should everybody else. And I think that technology to do this, we have already got live streaming of Oireachtas hearings and all of that. The technology is YouTube. That's all it is. We can see it in the Johnny Depp case. And one might argue that it makes a laugh at justice. It doesn't make a laugh at justice. I mean, what makes a laugh at justice, in my view, is that we have effectively star chambers, effective star chambers, because while one might say the courts are accessible to the public, there's very little engagement by the public and very little proactive encouragement by the public to be there. Like, for example, if they created nice cafes around the courts, etc., and made them warm and accessible, the people might say, I shall go down there for a few hours and see what's happening in my local court and keep an eye on things. It might help our civic engagement, our sense of responsibility, sense of understanding about how justice is being administered in our name, because that's what it's done. So just a reflection, I just want to play again the starting point of what this witness said. So just again, we just listen to that.
Your deposition, you testified that you were going to be paid $100 an hour for your time in this case.
I did not testify to that.
You did not?
That's an error in the transcript.
So just to say, these are all high-powered operators. This woman has claimed she's paid $500 an hour for her work. So she's not your run-of-the-mill Joe Public. So if I, as a member, say Joe Public, end up in a court case or something, and I challenge the veracity or authenticity or accuracy of something which appears in a transcript, how am I likely to get the forum to speak my truth? Who's likely to listen to me? There is somewhere in the law a thing called the slip rule, which in reading it, if you found that a court judgment which had been written up and sealed off had an error in it, that there was some mechanism by which you could go back in and get it corrected. But it's as slippy, when you call it a slip rule, I can tell you that it is a very slippy environment. And anyway, if you went in, if let's say you were involved in a court hearing and a court order is produced, and it is perfected. Again, that is another area. What does perfection mean? Perfection would suggest that both parties agreed to that they were the contents of the order, and that it is then stamped by the court officials, and that becomes the law. Okay, if you've been involved in court hearings, you'll find that many's a time. I can say I have been involved where many's a time judges have stated, this is my decision, and yet this is not what has ended up in the orders. So the correlation between what was actually said and what was written, in my direct experience, has not been 100%. In order for me to go back and challenge that again, just examine the personal dynamics. First, let's say I'm a lay litigant, I'm going in, I'm saying to a judge, what's written here is not what you said. So let's say my experiences would have been around the pre-Dar case. So the judge would have no recording. So all he would have had would notes. Whose notes? His notes, the registrar's notes. So if you go back, so what's about the accuracy of people's notes? I used to think when I went to court, it was all like Rumpola de Bailey, that the person in the front there in front of the judge was writing all this stuff verbatim. I actually thought that was where the transcripts came from. I didn't realize they were just probably writing squiggles. I don't know what they were writing, but I realized they weren't transcribers. There had to be a skilled transcriber brought in to do this. Then you rely on the judge's notes. What are the judges writing? Now, if you're questioning or thinking around this, you might look back to the Sheedy affair and the investigation into the administration of justice around the Sheedy affair, which was overseen by the late Chief Justice Hamilton, and he produced a report on this. And I had difficulty in getting this report, but I did get it from a politician somewhere. I did have a copy somewhere. I have a hard copy of it somewhere. I probably digitized it at some stage. But it was interesting that in that there, one of the issues of contention came up where the records kept by either the judge or the registrar, I'm not sure, but of whoever was involved in the cases. And again, there were errors in that situation. And you may remember that a number of people, including a guy called Quinlan, the Chief Registrar of Dublin County, and Judge O'Flaherty, ended up resigning as an outcome of all of that. let's say, muddy mess. The only way we seem to be able to do things in this country. So I'm not sure what clarity or what learning would have ever come, because we don't really have definition of who was responsible for what and under what circumstances. But certainly in that document that I got, there were copies of the records, the notes that were maintained. And as someone who was an AIDS that would have done his intercert and leaving cert, I finished primary school just the year after they finished the primary cert, but none of this would have even passed muster for primary cert material. That's how bad it was. But we are in 2022, and I started off this, and I'm showing you contemporaneous technology used in the States and available to all of us all over the world. So my contention is, the bigger picture is that all of these processes should be carried out in live, streamed, and also recorded, and that those recordings are available for review, for reflection, for challenging or examining and ensuring the correct record of what has happened is what's on the books. So, what is history, his story? I mean, is it just makey uppy stuff, or do we expect that accuracy is let me say what Confucius talks about. He says, hence there must be no arbitrariness in what is said. If language is not correct, then what is said is not what is meant. Okay? If what is said is not what is meant, then what must be done remains undone. Now, lots of people I've met on my journey have described me as being pedantic, as well as being awkward and all of the other things. But one must question, because the reason I'm pedantic is because when you tend to walk slowly around the roads, you tend to see all the detritus and the tins and the plastic and that which is damaging our environment a lot more in detail than you would see when you're sweeping by at 100 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour, 60 kilometers an hour, or whatever. So, and as Goethe or Michael McDowell or others suitably would say, the devil is in the detail. Sometimes, God is in the detail. But detail seems to matter in an investigation, as Jack Reacher says. And all of this, I throw into the idea that many people along my journey have experienced me recording conversations that I'm involved in, perhaps with them. And many of those people who are officials remonstrate with me. Most of them have told me I was illegal in doing such recordings. However, increasingly, and since the emergence of Sergeant Maurice McCabe back in February 2014, who recorded, I think, at least 2 conversations with the then confidential recipient for the guard, a highly decorated or educated lawyer, Oliver Connolly, who had multiple letters after his name in multiple different legal systems, who incorrectly claimed that Maurice McCabe's behaviour in doing so was unlawful, and he used in reference to that the Gubu case of the illegal recording of private conversations being had by Geraldine Kent of the Irish Times and Bruce Arnold, which was instigated at the behest of officials. That is recording a third-party conversation which you're not party to, whereas Maurice McCabe had legally recorded an intra-party between he and someone else. And yet Oliver Connolly almost destroyed his reputation. And Maurice McCabe, I believe, was basically one breath away from total destruction. However, simply because he had those recordings, neither to my knowledge of those recordings have ever been played in the general public space. They were certainly referred to, alluded to, and perhaps played back, I can't remember, in the Chariton Tribunal. But at least his behaviour around this has established, to some degree, at least an accessible understanding of the legitimacy of his position. However, I think the law relating to it, I think it's in 1993. I have the specifics and the documentation supporting that otherwise. But my sole interest always in recording conversations in which I've been involved is to establish accuracy about what was said. I've already explained and demonstrated here that the accuracy of a transcript, and in this case, we will have to presume that if the parties involved in this are being paid $500 an hour, that we're not talking about minimum wage transcribers with no skill sets. We should be talking about people with high level of skill, and also that they are not relying purely on real-time shorthand transcription, that they have the benefit of being able to listen back and watch back and cross-check their work. And yet we have a reference here to multiple errors, none of which have been corrected. So in a situation where I'm involved in interaction with officialdom or otherwise, whether it be with private sector business, whether it be for me, for example, with the BlackRock Clinic, who, have had conversations with me on the phone, which then they subsequently have claimed behavioural interactions which are contradictory to what was said in those conversations. My lived experience of the requirement to record detail in order to establish the accuracy of the content and the dialogue. That's been my primary reason. Now, the question, why would I want to do that? Is it to hang somebody else or to hold someone else accountable? I mean, just to be clear, my personal reason always for doing this is to calibrate my own sanity. This is my only interest in this. My only interest in this is what was said. What do I think was said? Is that what was said both by me and others? Because, I suppose as I go on in life, you realize it's not that I become more forgetful or otherwise, but I, like others, suffer from false memory syndrome on numbers of reasons. I may firstly have misheard. In other words, I mishear what somebody else says genuinely and in real time. And anybody who's taken the trouble to be in almost any court in the world will appreciate the difference between the audio landscape, the oral landscape of the Abbey Theatre and any of the courts in Ireland with their hard surfaces, reverberating materials and echo chambers. So mishearing is not to be unusual. And the other thing is you may be in an emotive state or in a frame of mind whereby your accuracy may be, or your accurate recollection of what you said might not be 100%. The other thing is you may be in a highly emotionally charged environment, and it's possible you might either say something which you didn't mean or doesn't express what you want. It's what if said is not what is meant, as Confucius said. It's not clear. Let's say for me, I haven't communicated authentically and accurately what I've been trying to express. And I think if I can't express myself accurately, it's unreasonable to assume that another person can interpret what I actually meant with any degree of accuracy whatsoever. And, it's like me going in for a knee operation at BlackRock Clinic many years ago, and I find a surgeon feeling up my wrong knee. And I'm just thinking, is this a gig or something? And I'm saying, the problem I have is on the other knee. I was just checking, he said. And I'm thinking, he may have been just checking, or he might have been lining up for a double operation. I don't know. But, we're not taught in our society that to question. I mean, please, sir, can I have some more? More? As little Oliver said to whatever you call it, Mr. Bambooble or whatever his name was. But you certainly asking questions is not encouraged, let's say. And my own personal view of education and its primary function should be to teach our students, and start off with our young people, to encourage, to challenge, to guide them, to formulate critical evaluation of what they experience in the world, to prepare articulate, clear, concise queries on questions of where they require clarity, and to give an accurate expression as to what they're trying to do, what they wish, what their opinion is, or their recollection of facts of detail of which they're witness to. I think our whole society would be much better as a result of this. So anyway, this is, God, it's still May the, whatever, 9th, 10th, 11th. I'll just check. I started this on Monday the 9th of May. It's now 17:01. It's West Donegal. It's not a great day today, but it is a great day for reflection. So if you find this topic relevant, I would invite you to put comments below, whether it be in Facebook here, or whether it be in YouTube or wherever else I publish it. Certainly, if you can bring to light information which gives greater clarity to what I'm trying to say. If there's something incorrect about what I've said, apart from trying to catch me out and saying I'm a clown or you're better than me, I mean, that part really doesn't interest me. What interests me is that I could look back on this myself and say, does this make sense? Does it make sense? And the interesting thing in that clip when I showed it, that woman, nobody really seemed to care about whether there were errors and that anybody should have stopped to say, hey, look, maybe the judge should have stopped and said, hold on a minute here. If I'm here and I'm listening to material which comes from depositions which were transcribed, and if I've discovered that there are now a number of errors attributed to this, how do I know that the whole thing isn't a mess? So, wrong in one, wrong in all. Like once you start, if I had, one of the space modules going up into the sky and I found that, let's say there was tires and one of them had a flat tire and your man was about to count down and I was in the yoke and I was on a one-way ticket to Mars, I think I would say, excuse me, can we abort the flight and start a complete checkout? But the thing with, if you're on an airplane and, you heard the wee little red light going up there saying there's one of the engines just is not working too well today, but sure, we're in a hurry, we'll go ahead and go. I think we wouldn't be doing that. And again, I'm even surprised that the judge didn't say, excuse me, what level of this idea statistically of what confidence level can we attribute to the data which we are presenting as if it had some veracity? Now, if you want to move on from that and maybe reflect on the whole COVID experience that we've been involved in for 2 years, when we've been provided with data all the time, and, I'm just a guy watching the TV looking at data, I have no idea, as in doubting Thomas, I can't put my finger in the wound and actually check for the wound myself. So I rely on people in positions of responsibility, people who've been chosen by us, or voted, or people who work as representatives of our public interests, as, for example, in the courts, the judges and the public servants acting in these places. They act in our name and in our part, and we pay them our taxes to do so. So what right do we have to expect accuracy? And if we are willing to put up with, not only the fact that there are errors, but as in that case, that the quantification of the errors, the statistical percentage of the errors wasn't even challenged. Nobody said, let's check any of this. So I would say, well, who's to believe that any of it's right? And this doesn't make me a conspiracy theorist. It makes me an engineer. I mean, one of the things I know in engineering is the idea of tolerance. So it seems to me that, the story about what's the difference between a mathematician and an engineer, that if a mathematician and an engineer were to divide the distance between themselves and an attractive woman by 2, and then divide it by 2 again and again and again and again, well, mathematically, both parties would never touch. There would be the epsilon effect, or the decreasing distance between them, never-ending decreasing distance, whereas an engineer would get close enough for all practical purposes. That's not meant to be a PC joke or otherwise. It's just meant to give you the idea of the difference in tolerance. So I understand that if you're producing resistors, for example, if you produce resistors with a 50% tolerance, they'll be cheap because it's easy to produce them. If you're producing resistors with 0.0000001% tolerance, they'll be very expensive, and they'll be of the very narrow band of the yield. And you won't get ones with 0%. I understand that. But when nobody's even measuring the percentage of the error. And when tolerance is, I sure look at whatever you're having yourself, I worry. Many years ago in the railway, I worked with Germans, Americans, and English engineers. And the Americans and the English were very clear that, oh yes, we work, well, maybe the Americans said we work to plus or minus, 1/16 of an inch. And the English guys, oh no, we're down to 1 thou. And the Germans, oh, we went one better than that. We don't do plus or minus anything. When we're measuring the width of a train, we only do plus tolerances. In other words, when they're overly wide. So we're to plus 0.05 of a millimeter. And one of the Irish guys, the federally, was there. I sure look at with Paddy, he's spot on, just spot on. So is this the republic that we live in, the republic of spot on, where measurements produce whatever the audience wants to hear? Or is there such a thing as a scientific reality that we stand by and defer to? And does this kind of concept matter to you, or does it only matter to you when it matters to you? In other words, like I posed this question with somebody there earlier today, and I sort of said, well, it's just not relevant to me, so I don't care. And I said, if you were in with a surgeon, for example, who you read the notes they produced on something critical, like you might have lung cancer or something, and found that they were actually talking about some problem they thought you had in your big toe, would that matter to you? And oh yeah, that would matter. Whereas my proposition is that as a culture, things should matter. We should strive to do things right. We should understand tolerance. And what tolerance would allow us to do is to take things that are less important and then maybe have less expensive calibration and punitive oversight of that. And as we move into the areas of more serious issues, there should be very critical accountability for things that happen. It seems to me that we live on the make-up element of things. So anyway, that's a thought for today. Interesting to see how this turns out. Again, I'm using an iPad and I'm trying to, so just explain to you, I'm just using a front-facing camera and I'm using my gestures to swipe across, four-finger gestures to look at what I have on my Photos app in behind now. So that's all for now. Goodbye.